Iquitos, which is absolutely beautiful. I mean, anyone who could get a chance to at least, view some pictures of it is well worth it, because there's entire cities just floating there on the water, and people's houses, even they farm somewhat, obviously not large amounts, but they farm on the water. They have chickens and dogs that, as the backyard, they go out and play in the water. The kids, from their house, there's like an open wall or something like that, just because usually all the houses are just one room, and the kids, instead of having a backyard to play in, they just jump out into the water. And then there's bars, there's clubs, and it's actually kind of funny, because instead of in a city where you see a lot of kids driving around in their souped up cars, there's kids here trying to pick up, like there was a group of 3 like teenage boys trying to pick up on these girls floating next to them in their canoe. So it's just kind of interesting in that sense.
Oh my God, yeah, I'm looking at some pictures of this right here, and I had no idea that a place like this existed.
Yeah,
wow, that's really interesting.
It's definitely interesting. Yeah.
So this is this is this a flooded area? Does this only happen like once every year? Is this all the time?
No, it's right on the Amazon, so that's how they live.
Right.
And obviously the water level rises, so they don't anchor the homes to the ground or anything like that, because then that would cause the water to enter the houses. So they're literally they're tied to other houses and ultimately tied to the shore, so they don't float down the river.
Right.
But they're not anchored to the bottom, so when the water level rises, the house would rise with it, and then also lower with it as well.
So, again, if we return to the kind of sanitation thing, is it like a cesspool? The water, is it used as a dumpster as well? Do you know?
I would have to imagine. I'm not gonna say for sure, just because I don't know if they. I'm not sure if they go off into the woods to go to the bathroom or to bathe or anything along those lines. I think they bathe in the actual Amazon,
right?
But I'm not really sure about what they do with kind of like the bathroom setting. I'm not sure if they just go straight into the water or go off into the woods. I'm not really sure about that.
Yeah. Well, okay. It's I guess one as always has to be a bit careful when being down there.
Yeah,
I guess,
yeah.
If you come from,
I kept my hands out of the water for that part.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so very interesting. So you have some footage down there. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wanted to ask you about that as well. In regards to, I guess you might have even started to edit some of the material yet. But did you have a lot of hours of footage from down there?
Quite a bit, yeah. I would say, and the biggest problem I had was the fact that my HD camera was broken or getting fixed at the time, at least, and so I had to take down more of a consumer grade camera. So the quality, I'm working with it. You'll get the idea in the film. The film is also going to have kind of an independent vibe to it.
Sure.
It's not going to be too polished and pristine, just to give it a texture and a sense that's a little bit more palatable for people that are into the more independent movement. But yeah, so the footage, it's decent. I'm going to be working with it as much as possible with color correction and all that. But I would say maybe I got about maybe an hour and a half worth of like the floating cities and just miscellaneous things here and there. I didn't get any in Peru of the actual ceremony, but I got the ayahuasca kitchen. I got some footage of the shaman preparing the ayahuasca, and also we traveled, because there's a lot of indigenous tribes right around the same area that we visited, and they would take us in, they would feed us, and then they would kind of just show us the some of their dances, some of their songs, and kind of just their lifestyle, and then we would move on. So I got a lot of that footage that I'm going to be including in the movie.
Nice. And was it a hassle carrying around all the equipment? Did you have separate audio stuff, or did you pick up that from the camera? And did you have, if you had a lot of stuff with you, was it a hassle or troublesome carrying all that stuff around?
Well, actually, it was just the camera. I didn't have the with this camera I had the microphone that I use for my HD camera it didn't have the attachment for this. It didn't have a mic input or anything along those lines. And I was going to bring some form of external audio equipment, but I wasn't able to. I wouldn't have been able to carry that around because, like you were saying, yeah, it was a hassle just getting through the woods because there weren't like clear, walking paths for much of this. There were some, but a lot of it, even if I didn't have a camera in my hands, even if my hands were free, it still would have been pretty difficult. Like we were climbing over logs, basically trying to balance ourselves to walk over logs. That was our only way of getting across certain streams and rivers and things along those lines.
Well, it sounds like a really interesting adventure, that's for sure. And,
yeah, definitely.
And then you spend some time again there. We can go back and talk about the Lakota a little bit. Maybe they, as far as I understand here, they actually declared their independence from the U.S. back in, let's see here, I think this was back in 2007, around December. I know that a few news stories came out about this, talking about the fact that they've declared independence from the U.S. And did that affect anything of your decision to do it there?
Well, it actually didn't. It didn't really affect my decision. It just made it a lot better of a decision because I was interested in visiting the Lakota tribe just because I know a lot of their oral traditions and a lot of their the history behind it. I've read up a lot on Native American legends and myths, so I was very interested in meeting them. Regardless, that was just kind of the icing on the cake when I got the opportunity to go out there and get married by the shaman. So. It's definitely very interesting that they declared sovereignty. And when I was actually lecturing up in Toronto, maybe a month after I did my last interview with you, and I was lecturing up there, and there was a person named Robert Paget who he is pretty much just he's a professional researcher on maritime admiralty law and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And he, I guess it's the Blackfoot up towards where he lives in Alberta, Edmonton, Alberta, and they, I believe, did the same thing. I'm not too sure about that, but I know that the kind of what he was getting into is when he was speaking with those tribes, he found out the actual history of the British colonization and the fact that apparently, now I haven't done my own research on this, but apparently it's a partnership between the original indigenous peoples of the Canadian area, which they called Turtle Island, and it's like a 50-50 ownership between the Crown and the indigenous people. So they call that whole spot of land Turtle Island, all of Canada, and it actually reaches down into the South Dakota because when I went out there for the marriage ceremony. Basil, the shaman, he spoke about even his land as being a part of Turtle Island, so I thought that was really interesting. Right.
And just to remind, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but we had Kevin Annette on the radio show here recently and talking basically about how the Native Americans in Canada specifically actually are being eradicated and has been for the last, ever since the Europeans basically got over there, but that this actually is continuing until this day, and that there's, they're being terrorized, they've been put into these, school systems and what have you. So I mean, it's a heck of an awful situation over there, I know, and it feels like, at least when talking to Kevin, that every Native American tribe is being subjected to this in one form or another, that they're being either suppressed or even eradicated in some form. Did he talk about that, anything at all?
No, he didn't. I didn't get a chance to actually even listen to that interview. I was definitely very interested in it, but I ended up listening to the Paul Levy interview, which actually he touched upon a lot of the things I wanted to touch upon today. So I had to kind of change around some of what we're going to talk about, but it's definitely I definitely am aware of what's happening up there to a small extent, and it's like you said, it's been happening for quite some time now.
Yeah.
It's nothing new. Obviously, there's even in here in America, the Native American tribes, even the Lakota, a lot of the lot of the stories and everything that I was just receiving from Basil, the shaman, of their history, how they actually broke off into the Nakota, the Dakota and Lakota tribe, as kind of like a branch of what they would call the Sioux. But I guess they don't consider themselves a Sioux tribe. They consider themselves either a branch of the Nakota or the Dakota tribe.
Right.
But yeah, just I mean, it's incredible the amount of genocide that's not spoken about. There's a book actually called the People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. That I mean, it's a large book, but it gets so into the Native American tribes and just the colonization, and through Columbus and those colonizers up here in North America, and then Pizarro and who is it, Cortez?
Yes.
You know, all throughout the Americas, just the Portuguese and the Spaniards. The colonized. I mean, it's been happening, and it's definitely nothing new. The most amazing aspect of it, though, is how little it's really even brought out to the public. I mean, like all the genocides that have been happening, you know, in Darfur, and obviously in World War II, and pretty much all over the world that you hear about consistently. Even to this day, you hear about how those are some of the most brutal genocides.
Right.
Yet nothing is really spoken about. Indigenous tribes like Aboriginals and Native Americans.
Exactly, and it seems to be kind of they are handpicking what kind of genocides we are to hear about, because again, we never hear about the Armenians, and as you say, many of these South Americans and Native American tribes are never talked about. The Aborigines in Australia,
Right.
all over the place in a way. And we, you know, as you said, we usually hear about the Holocaust, you know, about the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
We hear about some of the other stuff going on, but no, so it's really interesting, and it's worth highlighting that again, because you know it's happening in all the time. And I think that, you know, Kevin Annett again talked about the idea that this goes back to very much of the agreements of the Commonwealth that the British royal families were setting up at that point, and basically taking over the land for many different reasons, but primarily in order to gain the resources there. And I think that even the things that took place in Kosovo and Bosnia is a part of that same agenda, so to speak, of actually getting into an area and occupying it in one form or another, and getting control of the minerals, the wealth that are in the particular region at that time. Africa, again, Nigeria, the oil and the diamonds down there, you know, goes on and on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, I mean, the way that I look at this, I mean, I typically, I can't get around it. I usually look at everything as in a symbolic way. And when I look at this, it really just has more to do with, what else would you imagine? Especially, I refer everything to biology, and in a medical approach, what would you imagine invades a certain area, depletes it of its resources, and then moves on?
It's a cancer.
That or a parasite.
A parasite, sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, and that's the way that I look at a lot of this, and I believe that it's a psychological parasite. You know, it's a spiritual parasite. It's not something that is it's not something that's really just in physical form.
Sure.
It's something that's happening on a collective level. And actually, what I was mentioning about, was it Paul Levy that was talking about? He mentioned something about what a parasite, the nature of what a parasite does is it will invade the host, start depleting it of its resources, but then it will also emits like little chemicals out into the bloodstream that encourages or kind of like makes the host crave certain foods that will put the nutrients that doesn't serve the host, but it serves the parasite.
Right.
And then it basically that's exactly what it is, and that's the way that I look at. That was a perfect way to put it, because that's the way that I look at all of this colonization. Specifically from the Commonwealth, and specifically from the Crown, that goes into areas, and these are the areas that you hear the least about.
Yeah.
These are the genocides that you hear the least about. When you look in Africa with the diamond mines and everything, how arms and the munitions and everything is fed to one warring tribe until